what I'd seen work for other people. So I was a heroin addict for basically the 90s and missed that decade, most of it. And ended up, by some miracle, some old junkie friends of mine said, you should go to Minnesota. I was in Boulder, Colorado. And he said, you should go to Minnesota or you're probably gonna die. And I said, well, what do you mean? They said, go to Minnesota, get off the plane, raise your hand, and say you need help, you're a junkie, and they'll help you. It's 23 years ago. And, you know, I got lucky. I got very lucky. I ran into some people, they embraced me, showed me the sober community, how it works, why you do it. And I took that path and that theme and I put it into the Sober House plan, program, whatever you want to call that. It certainly evolved over the years, but it started with this premise that getting sober was about getting a life, not about not using, right? I gotta go get a life. How do I do that? How do I make it meaningful? All the stuff that's involved in that. How do I restart it if I slip? And hopefully it will be enough and meaningful and you'll get into a routine and using looks ridiculous and maybe you're just one of those people who stays sober long term. I don't know that anybody has that secret. I mean, we've seen people fall off after years. But I thought if we stuck with that idea that this is about having a life, not about not using, we can incorporate that into the rules, everything in the Sober House, and just keep that theme alive and use it as sort of the general purpose. So everything from how the house is organized, and on the NAR website, I think they mentioned yesterday about these modules. They're gonna have some videos on the NAR website about how to do this, some training modules, and I just did one. And I walked through one of our sober houses and somebody filmed me and I literally talked about the furniture and the beds and the kitchen and the garbage and the doors and the door locks and all the little things and how we set up a sober house that advance that concept, right? Why do we pick this kind of furniture? Why do we pick these kind of beds? Why do we do maintenance the way we do it? And so we're gonna try to get into a little bit of that in an hour and 10 minutes or whatever we've got here. But so I'm gonna start with the house and I'll get into some of these categories. I don't know, we lost the thing on here, but I've got it down here. So here's a good example, like when somebody comes to me and says, hey, I want to open a sober house, and I say, the first thing I say is where, right? So I think your sober house should be, or recovering residence, whatever you want to call it, in the community where there's access. And I think that just access to bus lines is an old narrative, right? I think it's about, can I walk down my street and feel like that's my neighbor and that's my driveway and that's, that's the school on the corner and I live here, right? We built this thing on this concept of sober living, not sober housing, a long time ago. This is a lifestyle, an opportunity to repurpose a lifestyle. It's sober living, not sober housing. You can house people out by the airport forever, but if you create a sober living model, you start to change lives, right? And I know that sounds dramatic, and I'm not a very dramatic person, but I think it's important to reference and understand the difference. So there are things in the house that we do. We buy certain kinds of furniture that last. We do things like, for example, we do inventory of kitchen stuff and things that people need every day, so that when we're in house meetings and we're talking to the residents, we don't hear about, hey, there's no spoons, hey, there's no garbage bags, hey, there's no toilet paper. They'll talk about innocuous crap forever so that they don't have to talk about themselves. So if you eliminate that stuff and you get into the house meeting every week, and we're not talking about supplies or maintenance. So I'm talking to my staff constantly about if someone's dresser broke, get them a new dresser. If somebody's lamp broke, have the light bulbs in the closet, have the supplies on hand all the time. Let's not talk about that stuff, right? One of the rules we have in the house is you can't bring any furniture into the house. You can't add anything to the house. We will get it, we own it, right? Because I don't want to own your stuff that you used to have in your using apartment. And I don't want to get surprised. I had one anecdotal story about some guys who took the couch off the back screened-in porch because they saw one on the corner that looked cool, and they took mine out, put it on the corner, and put the one that was outside the corner in the house, which had been rained on and was full of bugs, and it was kind of a shit show. But the important thing is that there's just little tricks that we've learned over the years about how to keep the house functioning. And like I said, that keeps you out of the conversation of stuff that doesn't really matter, right? And so when we do a house meeting every week and everybody gathers in the living room, and by the way, our sober house meeting policy is, if your mother is chained to the railroad tracks and the train is coming, maybe you can miss the house meeting. Otherwise, don't ask, right? Because we need that community. We need everybody in that room to create a unified group and to create some stuff we're going to talk about in a few minutes. So we first go through this house meeting, we talk about supplies and innocuous stuff and get that off the table. And then I think here's one of the most important things that we've learned over the years. And this leads into creating community, creating a place of inclusion, creating a place where you feel heard, and some accountability. So everybody sits down in the living room, and we go around the room, and it's 8 or 10 or 12 people in the house. And I say, okay, Jeff, talk about, did you hit your requirements for the week? Meetings, sponsorship, service work, I went to my job, I went to my IOP, whatever the compliance level stuff is, we have a book, we track that. After everyone's done that, we go through again and say, talk to me about your last 7 days. Highs, lows, what do you got? I got a job, my boss is kind of a jerk, but hey, I got a paycheck, my mom's off my back about that, things are okay, right? Typical scenario. Then we'll ask the rest of the house, is that what you see? Because somebody might give you a synopsis of their week, like, everything's great, man, I'm really sober, it's awesome. And then all the roommates are like, that's crap, he's never here, we never see him, he's always with the girlfriend, or she's always at the boyfriend's house, and they will tell you. And then my response is, you have got to be here, you have got to live here, you've got to connect to the residents in your house, and some people do that better than others, some people are better at making friends. But the requirement is that you are there and you're making an effort and that you're giving the group something to go on. Some level of transparency that's going on in your life. So that when we ask the group that question, they can be like, yeah, I know, he's telling the truth, right? That's kind of what we see and what we see from him or her. I think that's crucial about trying to get the residents to understand you've got to give the group something to hold on to give you accountability and to watch out for you, right? You get that back in tenfold if you give it to us. If you give us some sort of transparency about your routine, we can help you, right? It's not just, hey man, if you're isolating, I'm gonna come knock on your door. It's a little deeper than that, right? And we do things like you can't have a television in your room. You can't have your own, Comcast account in your room with a 65-inch TV above your bed. You never leave, right? So there are practical things to pull people out of isolation. But I think mostly it's a conversation, right? And it's a consistency in the house meeting, and we talk about it. Every house meeting, we sit down, we talk about some of the same things over and over and over, right? You have to be at this meeting, and we remind people. So I think it's, we could go on and on and on and on about the sort of details in that. There's part of the process involves like